we're breaking down cut candidates in today's video. So Saints fans, get in the comment section for me. Name a player that you think will be cut by the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to break down 5 players that I believe are at risk of not making the Saints 53-man roster. And you're going to have about 6 seconds to let me know in the comment section once this intro video starts. So ready, set, go. All right, so why are we talking about cut candidates in today's show? Because we're already seeing the Saints making some of those roster moves. Earlier in the week, last week, we saw James Washington be released. And today, as we film this video on Tuesday, August 22nd, the wide receiver Bryan Edwards has been waived. So let's talk about who else is at risk of being cut. And I'm just going to give a quick few thoughts on Bryan Edwards before we get to that. So just some thoughts around the wide receiver being released. He was with the Falcons. He was with the Saints this year. He was with the Raiders previously in his career. I mean, just call it how it was. He was trash. He just was not good. This was a guy that in 2 games, just didn't really do anything. And then last week, it was atrocious. Versus the Chargers, he not only had 1 penalty, but 2 penalties that overturned touchdowns. Can't be doing that if you're on the roster bubble. And not to mention, he had 4 targets, 0 receptions. Inexcusable, especially when you're a guy like a vet, and especially when you have players like A.T. Perry and Shaq Davis, Jontre Kirkland, shout out to the LSU product as well, who are making some noise. Can't be making those kind of mistakes. And this is really unfortunate because I actually thought, and I truly believed, that Bryan Edwards would unseat Tre'Quan Smith as your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 kind of player. So it's just interesting to talk about. That's the news to discuss, and that's my take on all of that. So you tell me, Saints fans, are you surprised that New Orleans cut Bryan Edwards and waived him, moved on from him, whatever you want to say? Let me know, are you surprised? Type Y for yes, type in for no, and let's get into the cut candidates. All right, so the first one that I want to talk about, a former Las Vegas Raider, came over with Derek Carr in NFL free agency, Jonathan Abram, the safety, and why he's a cut candidate. So the production through the preseason, it's been pretty mediocre at best. Only 3 tackles, hasn't made a lot of noise. But the real big reason, Jordan Howden. Jordan Howden has been a stud. And when you take a look at the current depth chart for the safeties, Howden has surpassed Jonathan Abram. J.T. Gray, he's a special teams ace. He ain't going anywhere. I would personally rather roll with Smoke Monday. Give me some of that youth. Give me some of them Pop-Tart hits that Monday puts on all those players every single time he gets on the field. You saw it a ton at Auburn. You've seen it a little bit in the preseason so far. And so that's why I think that Jonathan Abram can make it. And I want to run Jordan Howden with this unit. I want to see him get reps. I want to see him be dominant and take over games. Because Jordan Howden, you spent a draft pick on him. You spent a late round draft pick, but he's a player that is already making noise. And as we know, the New Orleans Saints defense is always solid. You have a great leadership, in Tyrann Mathieu, good leadership, good skills in Marcus May, and Jordan Howden is in a great position to succeed. So that's why I think Jonathan Abram could find himself being cut. A former first-round pick, hasn't really panned out to be the player that we all expected him to be. But I want to get Jordan Howden some of those reps. And guys, before we get into my other 4 cut candidates, subscribe if you love the New Orleans Saints. Because guess what? If you don't, I'm calling you out. You secretly like the Falcons, and that means you're a fraud, and that means that you have bad taste in sports, because guess what? The Saints would never blow a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. Guess who also owns that poverty franchise? The New Orleans Saints. So subscribe, lock us in today if you are a diehard fan. All right, don't click out of the video. Hear me out. Give me 10 seconds to hear me out. There's an asterisk next to Jimmy Graham's name for a reason. As we know, Jimmy Graham had some weird things happen over the past weekend, right before the preseason Week 2 game against the Chargers. He had that seizure. It was the seizure that was believed to be a seizure, and there was an arrest report. There was a bunch of weird stuff. I don't really want to get into all of that, but if Graham's health is still in question, closer to week 1, or if there's still some lingering problems with that, I could honestly say he could be cut. However, some good news on that. The reports are that Graham is expected to return to practice this week and even as early as Wednesday. Again, we're filming this on Tuesday. Currently, I'm on a bachelor trip out of town in Arizona, so we wanted to give you guys some content. So if things change or anything around this, I'm sorry about that, but we're trying to give you the content. And when you look at the tight end room, obviously, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, those are tight end 1, tight end 2. Kind of an asterisk next to Taysom Hill. Yeah, he's a tight end, but we know he's used for more than that. But, Jimmy Graham, he's a player that he's familiar with the Saints. He's a red zone threat. He's still a big-bodied guy. Jesse James, J.P. Holtz, those are some more guys on the roster. Lucas Krull, though. Shout out to the former Pittsburgh Panther, and also, fun fact, the former pitcher at the University of Arkansas, Woo Pig Suey. He's shown some flashes in his preseason reps. And at training camp, he's even shown some flashes. So I would think that Jimmy Graham, if things were to go poorly, fingers crossed they don't, but worst case scenario, you need that tight end 4 kind of guy. Lucas Krull can serve as that role. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Lucas Krull finds himself back on the practice squad. I think that he could be a player that, if players get hurt, gets elevated. I think the Saints can have some value with him as well. But I really hope that Jimmy Graham can have good health. I hope that this whole thing works out, because I'd love to see number 80 catching touchdowns, spiking it through the goalpost. Who wouldn't want to see that? So we're going to send out some prayers, some good vibes, some thoughts over to Jimmy Graham. Show him some love. Get in the comment section. Type 80 to send some prayers, send some positive vibes, so that way he can get healthy and we can see him play this year. All right, moving on from Jimmy Graham, staying on the offensive side of the ball, Tre'Quan Smith. Now, I know that earlier I said Bryan Edwards was the guy who I thought would unseat him. However, what I will say is, don't sleep on the youngsters. Don't you dare sleep on Shaq Davis. Don't you dare sleep on Jontre Kirkland. These are players that are making some real noise. Shaq Davis is a big-bodied guy. He can climb the ladder to go up and get a ball like nobody's business. I mean, he literally looks like a firefighter moving up and down the ladder so damn fast. It is impressive. Do not sleep on the youngsters. And another reason to not sleep on the youngsters, they're healthy. You know who hasn't been? Tre'Quan Smith. He hasn't practiced since August 6th, which also means he hasn't participated in any preseason games. So, obviously, there's the familiarity there with the team and Tre'Quan Smith. He's been around the team for quite a while now. But we know what you get out of him. It's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be the whole worst thing in the whole wide world. But it will be extremely average is how I would describe it. And if you want to be better than that, you can look at your wide receiver depth chart. Lynn Bowden Jr., let's just call it how it is. He's lighting things up. He's making some noise. And I think that he's a player that adds true special teams value, especially if you want Rashid Shaheed to stay away from the kicker and punt return unit. If you want him to be solely a wide receiver and an offensive weapon, Lynn Bowden Jr. offers you that special teams ability. A.T. Perry, we saw what he did in preseason week 1. Absolutely lighting up the stat sheet, being the MVP of the day without a doubt. But that's where Tre'Quan Smith might find himself losing that roster spot. Keith Kirkwood, there's value there. Kawan Baker, there's value there as well. So if the Saints want to move on, I wouldn't be surprised if Tre'Quan Smith still does not find himself on this roster. If that's the case, I would bet $100 that he goes to Denver. So let's talk about Kyle Phillips and why he is a cut candidate for me as well. And I just want to go ahead and lay this out there. Just because these guys on the list doesn't mean they're bad football players. I don't want people in the comment section saying I'm calling these guys terrible athletes or anything, because they're better than I am. But I'm going to get into my analysis on Kyle Phillips and the defensive line group here in just one moment. But guys, I got to get you guys to get swagged out. Trust me, you do not want to be the guy at your preseason week 3, NFL week 1 watch party. You're at the bar. You're watching the show with me. You're doing whatever you're doing when the Saints play. Trust me, you do not want to be the one who had last year's hats. So you can get this year's sideline hats at chatsports.com/Saints hats. Not only are they fresh, not only are they clean, but man, they are awesome, and they are on sale for you, Saints fans. This one is my personal favorite. I always shout it out because I think it looks solid. I think it looks great. And I'm actually rocking this lid right now as we speak on the golf course in Arizona for this bachelor party. So if you want to check in and see what that's looking like, at TraceGerard48 on social media. But get your gear now. Chatsports.com/Saints hat will be available in the comment section in the description of this video. All right, so let's talk about Kyle Phillips and as to why he could be a cut candidate. Payton Tuner. That is a big reason why I think he could be a cut candidate. Payton Tuner says he's feeling a lot more confident. He's showing a lot of signs and a lot of pop, which are the reasons why the Saints drafted him in the first round a few years ago out of Houston. The former Cougar, he says, I feel like my confidence has been rising. Coach Grantham just keeps coaching and help guiding me, and I just don't feel super restricted. Just having that freedom creates confidence. And you know what leads to production? Confidence. You know what makes things happen? Confidence. I will always sit here and say confidence is key, and I love to see that out of Payton Tuner. The confidence is there, but let's see if the production can lead up to that as well. So that's why Kyle Phillips could find himself potentially not on the roster, because Payton Tuner, some of these other defensive linemen are really showing out. Nico Lalos especially. I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury issue, not expected to be anything major, but Kyle Phillips, he's at the bottom of the depth chart already, so it's going to be an uphill battle for him. Last but not least, I know you guys are going to hate this one. The Tulane prospect, the Tulane linebacker, Nick Anderson. And really quick, I just want to give some credit out to Jaylon Smith. He looked amazing in preseason week 2. And my guy, Ross Jackson, over at Locked On Sports, Saints News. Well, I mean, what doesn't Ross do? Like, let's be honest. I'm a huge Ross Jackson fan. I've had the blessing and I've had the opportunity to get to know him pretty well and have some conversations with him. And one thing that I find really interesting about this tweet, I think that it's pretty cool that Dennis Allen was speaking highly of him. So basically, the tweet reads, Saints head coach Dennis Allen spoke highly of newly added linebacker Jaylon Smith. Credit him as being highly productive, being highly instinctive, which was evident in his plays on Sunday. Did say that the big thing with him will be tied to what he can bring to special teams as well. So if he can make some noise on special teams, if he can make some noise in that linebacker role, he got runs with the first team during training camp and during joint practices. So Jaylon Smith, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy who beats out some players for a roster spot. He looked good, man. He had some nice hits. He had a couple good tackles. He had a really pretty pass breakup. He shows he can still move around pretty fluidly. So shout out to Jaylon Smith for, rocking out and having a good game in week 2 for the preseason. Nick Anderson, though, it's been kind of quiet for him. It's not a bad thing. It's nothing against him. It's just that other players are performing a little bit better. So that's, again, it's not taking away from what Nick Anderson is capable of, but he is a little small. I mean, at not even 5'10", not even 6 foot, 230 pounds, it's kind of tough to, make a roster when you're that size in general. Let's call it out as the kid's a hard worker. Great story, absolutely. I 100% recognize that. But great stories don't win you football games. Production and talent does, and it's not taken away from the talent. It's just there's more talented players out there. So I need you to get in the comment section, Saints fans. Grade Jaylon Smith's tenure with the Saints so far. It's only been one game, a handful of practices, so, it's kind of hard to gauge it, but I want you to let me know. Scale it for me 1 to 100. If it's a 1, you think that he's just played terribly. You want the Saints to go and get literally anybody else a linebacker. Heck, sign me as a linebacker. Or 100. Man, this guy might be the real deal. He could be a real guy in the rotation. He could be a starter. Who knows? For me, I'm personally at like a 75, 78 kind of range area. Very impressed with him so far. There's still a lot to be proven with him, and I understand that, but I want you guys to let me know. The Saints fans, as always, thank you guys for watching. Do not forget to subscribe. Hit that thumbs up icon. Turn on your notifications. We'll see you at the watch party on Sunday night. Y'all stay golden. Catch you next time.